This has been the cause and downfall of many empires. In this episode, I'm going to address why a progressive agenda creates retrogressive results. My name's Doug Andrew, and I've been helping a lot of people, thousands of people, optimize their financial assets now for 4.5 decades. And in teaching these people, sometimes create wealth, and many of them have come to me and they have created sort of empires themselves. I often ask them, so how did you start this multi-million-dollar empire? And they love to share their stories, and many times they will say, you know what, I've worked so hard. I grew up after the Great Depression. My parents went through that, and they taught me how to work. I've worked so hard. My kids will never have to work as hard as I did. About 20 or 30 years later, they come back in my office, and I say, how's it going? And they go, well, Doug, not so good. I don't know what's wrong with my kids. They don't even know how to work. And I go, maybe you stole that from them. Remember, you used to tell me what made a man out of you and how you had to go through and overcome struggles and hardships, and you worked really, really hard. And you didn't want your children to have to work as hard as you did. And so you protected them. And now you're wondering why they don't even know how to work? So what's a better way? And this is why I wrote a book called Entitlement, Abolition, How to Abolish Entitlement Mindset with your children, grandchildren, maybe even your employees. And I'll share a little bit more about how you can get a free copy of that book at the end of this episode. But let me talk about the importance of making sure that we don't go down that same path where empires, like the Roman Empire, what caused it to go under? Why did it start all over again? And we've had many civilizations that go through cycles, and they begin to prosper, and pretty soon they sit back and they think everything's hunky-dory, and they stop doing what they did in order to build the empire, and they think it's just going to run automatically, and the next generation comes up and they just sort of say, oh wow, when do I get my share? By the third generation, they're sitting around and it depletes all of it, and they're back to rolling up their shirt sleeves again. In America, it's like shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. Wealthy families who worked really hard, oftentimes when they just leave it behind and it's dumped into their kids and grandkids' laps, by the 3rd generation, they're all sitting around and they just waste it. And then the 4th generation is starting all over again, rolling up their shirt sleeves, having to work all over again to accumulate the wealth. How sad is that? But it's not just unique in America. In Asia, it's rice paddy to rice paddy in 3 generations. In Europe, it's clogs to clogs, 3 generations. So what can we do differently to avoid this? Coming full circle, I started this out by talking that many progressive agendas, and by the way, recently we have a lot of progressive agendas going on right now. I have found through history, the cycles begin to repeat, and it actually causes retrogressive results. So we start all over again because progressive agendas end up saying, hey, we need to now redistribute. We need to make reparations for the past. We need to take from all of these people and redistribute and give handouts. And pretty soon everybody's sitting around, oh, I want the government to pay for this and this and this. I've seen this with many young people. I had an economics professor, a good friend of mine, and he has seen this change in the last 2 decades. Young freshmen will come into his economics class and he'll have them write an essay the very first day on what their idea is of the American dream. And he's flabbergasted because so many young freshmen will say, well, the American dream would be for the government to pay for our education, to pay for my first car, for my house, for my retirement, for my health care. And he's like, where did you learn all this? Well, it's these progressive agendas. Let's just have the government take care of us from the cradle to the grave. How wonderful would that be? And he would say, who's going to pay for that? Well, the wealthy. You take from the wealthy, you tax the rich. Now, I think it was Margaret Thatcher that says the biggest problem socialism is that pretty soon you run out of other people's money. And that's going to be sad. And that's why many progressive agendas end up with retrogressive results, and we go back to rolling up our shirt sleeves again and trying to figure out how to eke out a living and work hard again to build what took America 200 years to build to, this most successful, thriving country in the world. And now we want to cripple it and start all over again with these progressive agendas. Is this beginning to make sense to you? So let me share with you a concept by Joseph Schumpeter called creative destruction. But before I do, be sure and click share or like. Subscribe to this channel. I'm passionate about providing insights into topics like this and opportunities that maybe you didn't know existed before, like I'm going to share at the end of this episode. Now, creative destruction, Joseph Schumpeter said, in societies, usually when we start to thrive and we start achieving abundance, pretty soon people sit back, and again, the next generation just takes things for granted, and sometimes they try to pass on that work ethic. But by the third generation, that's the brittle generation when it all breaks down, and the grandchildren, they're sitting around, oh, when do I get my share? Hey, will you pay for? Can I have? And so this is where sometimes we retrogress and we start all over again when we have progressive agendas. And so Joseph Schumpeter would often call this creative destruction. And he said many times when we are tempted to take successful enterprises or businesses or people who built their wealth and we tax 60, 70, and 80% of it to redistribute, whether you tax while they're alive or when they die and it transfers. If you take it away and you take away those incentives and then you dump it onto people and redistribute that, pretty soon it creates a dole or a handout. No, you want to give people a hand up, but not a handout, because then everybody becomes reliant again. It's sort of like the story of the seagulls. When they would ever create a dump, pretty soon the seagulls would just be flying around the dump and they would be fed. And then pretty soon they stopped dumping the garbage. They started using all of the garbage towards this dump by the ocean. And so the seagulls, they starved because they had been used to just having their food dumped out there. They forgot, the next generation of seagulls forgot how to go out and hunt and be able to find their food. This is what happens. And so we foster this creative destruction where we destroy because we come in, we start regulating, we start taking, we assessing and taxing, and pretty soon we creatively destroy that until there's an industry bypass. And then you bypass and new entrepreneurs come forth and they have to start all over again, rolling up their shirt sleeves to rebuild the wealth. Why do we need to do that? Why do we have to learn over and over again and go through these cycles? Why can't we learn from the mistakes of the past? So this is what motivated me to write a book called Entitlement, Abolition, because when we can break away from progressive agendas that end up with retrogressive results, you can begin to learn from the mistakes of the past generations, and you can leave behind systems that foster responsibility and accountability. I teach how to do that in this book. It was my 10th book, and we went through thousands of copies. They still fly out of our warehouse. I would love for you to have a free copy of this book, Entitlement Abolition. Now, you can go to entitlementabolitionbook.com or click below. You contribute a nominal amount towards the shipping and handling, and I'll pay for the book. My other most recent best-selling book is The Laser Fund, and I have a chapter in this book that talks about the concepts of this one. So these go hand in hand. And if you go to laserfund.com, you can get both of these books in a bundle if you'd like by paying for the priority shipping. The point is this: You can begin to learn by reading. There's also options there to listen and learn, watch and learn. But click on the link below. I'll pay for the book and I'll fire it out to you. And then there's options there for master classes. I have an 18-hour master class on how to optimize your financial assets and do it in harmony with these concepts I've been talking about. But also, if you want to learn how to teach your children, grandchildren, those that you care about, how to be responsible and accountable, also take the 18-hour masterclass of Entitlement Abolition. Once you read the book, you're going to want to take advantage of that masterclass. So here's to your brighter future, and I hope you will begin to understand that we can be innovative, but when we start marching down a progressive path too fast in an attempt to redistribute, all too often we retrogress and we have to start all over again, and we see empires destroyed. Why do we have to do that again and again? Let's learn from the mistakes of previous generations.